This podcast is sponsored by Wahoo, the first company to ever get me excited about a treadmill. Look, we all know that there's nothing quite like running outside, but the Wahoo Kicker Run is the next best thing. It's a high performance treadmill that responds to your running pace in real time. And that's not like other treadmills. You know, if you want other treadmills to do anything, you have to press buttons. But in the Kicker Run's run free mode, a sensor actually tailors the treadmill speed to your current running pace. So you can quickly accelerate or slow down without constantly pushing buttons. It's pretty much like you were running outside. Now, the first time I tried the Kicker Run, I couldn't believe how smooth it felt under my feet as I cruised at its fastest speed, 4 minutes per mile.
Dude, you lasted like 30 seconds at 4 minutes a mile.
It was like 45. Now, the Wahoo Kicker Run also integrates with a whole range of apps, including the interactive fitness platform Zwift Run, which takes you on a virtual course with real gradients, pace feedback, and other runners from across the world. And here's the best part. It allows you to properly keep up with your training on cold, wet, and stormy days, without awkward pace changes or desperate stares at the clock. And so when the spring finally comes, you're ready for race day.
Hold on. So that means that I can get to the Boston Marathon actually healthy and fit for the first time ever?
Exactly. Thanks to Wahoo for sponsoring this podcast.
This is the Marathon Handbook podcast. I'm your host, Michael Doyle, and I'm joined by Marathon Handbook's Frank Sinatra, the King of New York, Alex Sear.
What? Oh my God.
We're giving you that.
That's a big title.
Today.
That's big shoes. Those are big shoes to fill.
It just feels like a lot of pressure.
You did sing for us last time, Alex, remember?
You did. And it was pretty good.
Thanks. Yes.
You can carry a tune. He's going to sing us out with New York, New York at the end of this podcast. But first, I've got to introduce the queen of New York City, our Fran Drescher of Marathon Handbook.
Fran, oh, Mr. Sheffield.
The nanny, thank you for doing that. The nanny herself, Katelyn Tossi. Alex is under 30 and so very confused right now that we just made a nanny reference.
Yep.
If you are old like Katelyn and I, you got it. You're with us. So we're not talking 90s sitcoms today. Today we're talking the New York City Marathon. This is the big preview. We've done all the homework. We've watched the documentaries. We've done the research. We're ready to unpack New York for you. Every single nook and cranny of those 5 boroughs. Guys, let's get right into it here.
All right.
First things first. Where does the New York City Marathon as an event, super hyped event, arguably the most popular running event, maybe the most popular mass participation sport in the world every year. Where does it rank for you guys? Katelyn, is it, because I know you're the queen of trails. Are you tempted to to the tarmac for New York?
No, absolutely. I'm keeping it in the same.
No, I was like, whoa.
No, absolutely. You guys know it. I've got Boston as number 1, obviously, because I'm from Boston. London, as we spoke about, still sticks at number 2, but New York is 3, and it's like fighting for number 2 with all the rabbit hole reading and stuff that I've been doing this past week about New York. I'm excited for it.
And Mr. Sinatra, are you going to make your debut in the marathon in New York City one day? Is that the plan? Is that the plan?
Ooh, I might. So last time we ranked our marathons, I got all convoluted and I said Berlin, Chicago for the fast crowd, London and Tokyo for the people who want to travel. This is from the North American perspective, of course. And then New York, Boston for those who want to do a local, well-known marathon. And recently, I noticed what the difference was between the two. Boston is for bucket listers. I'm sorry, but I meet someone and they tell me they want to do Boston. I think, okay, this is like maybe your one and done marathon, right? Like you want to get the BQ because you want to do Boston because it's a story. If you tell me I'm doing the New York City Marathon, I'm like, this person's in it for more than the bucket list. So it's kind of like an extra little respect thing. Of course I want to do New York. I've been to New York a couple of times. I've done Central Park. I ran by pigeons. I did the whole experience. It's probably in the next 10 years, I'll find myself there. Yeah.
We've got a commitment, Katelyn.
We do.
In the next 10 years, Alex is going to run the New York City Marathon. Yes.
For our 50th birthdays, Michael, maybe.
exactly. You and I can walk it together. I think we were all committed to doing London as a group, but
Yeah.
New York would be special too.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would.
No, it's one of these 6 World Marathon Majors, of course. It's happening this Sunday, November 3rd. The broadcast and the racing starts at around 8 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. Important thing to remember, and an awesome thing if you're running the race, daylight savings time ends. I always get confused by daylight. Daylight, we're falling back in North America. So you actually gain, if you're a runner, you gain an hour, which is super sweet. So if you have that terrible night's sleep the night before, you get 1 more hour of terrible sleep before you go out and run the New York City Marathon. So we've done the homework for you. We've got the streaming and viewing info here. Okay, so it's showing, and it has shown for quite a few years on ESPN. I think it's showing on ESPN2, if you got that cable package in the United States. And the ESPN Plus app, if you're a subscriber to ESPN, you get it on the app. So you can live stream it through ESPN. ABC's doing this kind of weird package show between 3 and 5 p.m. On the national network, which is cool for the first time ever. They're calling it Live from the TCS New York City Marathon. And I think you're going to be able to see like the stream of people, and they're going to be tracking celebrities and that sort of thing. So I think it's live, but live at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, well after the elite races are done. So if you're a running nerd like we are, and you want to watch the elite race, you're going to want to start trying to figure out how to stream and watch this at 8 o'clock in the morning. If you're not living in the United States or do not have ESPN, it gets more
challenging.
Yeah. As Katelyn and Alex and I have all discovered, we think it's on Flow Track. We think, but it's not clear. So check. If you don't have a Flow Track subscription, it's not cheap, which sucks. But if you're a big fan of running, you got to do it because they have the rights to most of the big races these days. So the world feed is going to be featuring the former American marathon great, Kara Goucher, who's turned into a really good broadcaster.
Yep.
So that's going to be a solid broadcast. And then the television show version of it is going to be a good team. John Anderson, Hannah Storm, Carrie Tollefson, Galen Rupp is going to be out there giving, I think, his commentary on the men's elite race, I would imagine, and as he did in Chicago. So
shout out to Galen Rupp. Shout out to Galen Rupp. I didn't expect him to be a standout commentator because he was mostly silent for the entirety of his running career. He's awesome.
Yeah,
he's awesome on the mic.
He's been pretty good. And he's getting better. He's getting the reps in, right? So, and also for the first time ever, and I think this might be a sneaky smart way to follow the race, is you can stream the audio version of Goucher's live commentary on iHeartRadio's app live, starting at, I guess, 8 o'clock Eastern time. So if you don't know what iHeartRadio is, it's like a consortium of radio stations around North America. So you can download the app and listen to the broadcast live, which is kind of a clever way to do things. We will also, I should bury the lead here. We're going to plug ourselves right now. Live updates, we're doing them on the site. It'll be clear on the homepage on race morning, starting at 8 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to basically live blog the race for the entirety of the elite fields. And we'll also do an instant reaction pod pretty much right after the race is finished. We were just coordinating that before we hit record on the pod here. So check your podcast feed shortly after the race finishes. Give me a little bit of time to put it together, but at some point like midday, early afternoon, if you want to hear what we have to think or have to say and think about the race, you'll get that. Guys, the New York City Marathon is maybe the most important running event besides Boston for the history of running, because it kind of coincides with the growth and popularity and first big running boom in the 1970s. So we'll do let's do a little brief stroll down memory lane or walk back in the history books, because none of us were alive when this race started.
Oh, really? God, didn't realize.
I knew it. I knew the dig was coming, the age dig.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, Katelyn and I were a young and spry 18 and 20 years old when the first
Thanks,
New York
Michael.
City Marathon was hosted in Central Park in 1970. Cool fun fact.
We ran it. No, we were there.
We were two of the, 127 runners that ran the first New York City Marathon. And neither of us finished, because there was only 55 people that finished, and no women finished the race, actually.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't make it.
Yeah. And in the Wikipedia article, it says there's one woman that started the race, but in fact, Katelyn was also there running. So there's two. And so it was in Central Park, which is kind of wild to think about, because you think about now this race, just how gargantuan it is, how it's like floods all 5 boroughs, 50,000+ people. But there's 127 participants, 4.5 loops of the park. Started right by the Tavern on the Green restaurant, which is actually where the race finishes today in Central Park, which is kind of a cool little nugget of history. And the first race was long. It was 26.225 miles. So it was 11 yards too long. So, yeah.
So why there were so many DNFs, probably.
That's right. Yeah.
That's where they just started collapsing. That's why they started collapsing. Yeah. It was really funny, really fun to watch some of the footage of those first races, and how the participants were saying, like, yeah, we were dodging, strollers and dodging people here and there, nothing closed, and everybody looking at them like they were a bunch of crazies starting this like running revolution. That was really fun to listen to.
Yeah. I think that like, when you ask yourself the question, like, why is New York such a big deal, and why does it have this kind of like mythology around it, beyond it just being really big and it being really cool that you can run through this like crazy, the greatest city on earth, right? And a city that's just like
massive city.
It's just so packed all the time, and then just clear the roads out for runners for one day. And I think part of it is because it is so entrenched in the history of modern distance running. Like 50-ish years ago, running was like kind of a weirdo sport. Only total dorks ran. So it was really seen as this like kind of weird outsider sport. At the time, Boston was one of the only real like serious marathons that took place every year and had kind of a structure around it. And Boston was, quite frankly, for fast runners, and it was not a participation event. It was very much closed to the outside world. And New York, obviously the first iteration, it's like 127 people. So not a big thing, but very quickly and steadily grew, and was very clever in opening itself up to mass participation as the running boom, the jogging boom, as they called it back in the 70s, as that started to happen. So this dude, Fred Lebow, started the New York City Marathon, and also was a founding member of the New York Roadrunners, who still run the event today. And this guy, he was an eccentric character, Romanian Jew that fled Romania in the aftermath. I guess it was after the Second World War, when the Soviet Union sort of took over in Romania. Ended up in New York. It's kind of like a hustler, like garment district guy who was like selling knockoff apparel, like knockoff women's designer dresses and that sort of thing. Like, got obsessed with running. Wasn't, I guess, a particularly fast or good runner, but was just like totally obsessed with the marathon and with running. And then decided, you know what, we need to do a marathon in New York City. And so the New York City we've been to and we've traveled to, for the most part, although I'm curious to hear, Katelyn, if you've been to New York in the 90s. I went to New York for the very first time in the 90s, and it was sort of like the tail end of like scary New York. But like New York in 1970 was going bankrupt, ridden with crime and particularly organized crime. Boroughs were very dangerous back then, and it was a very different vibe, a very different place than it is today. Like Times Square was not Disneyland like it is now, right? So yeah, so New York was a different experience back in the day. And so the 5 borough course, which is just a crazy idea to think about in 2024. Like, you just couldn't pull this off in 2024. You could not get the permitting. You could not convince a city to buy into something like this. But they convinced the mayor in 1976 to allow them to move out of Central Park and do just a one-off of, let's touch all 5 boroughs, put together a 26.2 mile course, and we'll celebrate the bicentennial of the city of New York. The 200th anniversary was happening in 1976. And they convinced the city to do it. It corresponded with the Summer Olympics in Montreal, which were a big deal. And there's a lot of hype around distance running. Bill Rogers, Frank Shorter, 2 top American distance runners, were 2 of the best marathoners in the world at the time, and they were becoming like kind of sports celebrities. They decided to run New York in 76. A couple thousand people entered. There was a lot of buzz around it, and people were super hyped. And then the rest, as they say, is history. So yes.
But the crazy thing, it's like it's wild how close it was to not be. Rest is history. I think the New York Road Runners by 1976 were really scraping by. So Fred Lebo, at one point, I think, had quit his job, was putting everything into the Roadrunners. There was a story about him going to restaurants across town. And again, New York City wasn't what it is now. People knew each other a little bit more. It was more of a community kind of thing. And so he would go to restaurants and not be able to pay because he was out of money. And so it became common for a few of the restaurateurs to have to call the New York Roadrunners and say, okay, well, Fred owes us $12 this time. And so the business would have to pay. And so I think they were scraping by. It was fortuitous to have all these celebrities, these running celebrities emerge from somewhat nowhere in the Olympics, because otherwise I don't think the New York Marathon would be what it is today. And the New York Roadrunners either, right? They're now up to, 60,000 members? It's one of the biggest running groups in the world.
Yeah, I did some reporting a few years ago on the New York Roadrunners, more complicated story, but just looking at their assets and holdings. I mean, they own property. They have, they own the New York City half and a bunch of the Brooklyn half, I believe they have as well. They have a whole Fifth Avenue Mile, a whole bunch of different races, and it's like they're a big corporation now, right? And this all started with like sort of this ragtag crew of weirdos in Central Park in 1970. And to your point, Alex, the very first winner of the New York City Marathon in 1970 was given a small cash prize and a trophy, and then like LeBeau bummed the money off of him after the race because he took it back because he needed it, which is so great. It's like, I need that $50 back.
We'll
get it to you in the future. Run next year. We'll double it.
Yeah, they were nearly redlining. That I think is the fun thing. And you think back about the New York City Marathon versus Boston. You think of back in the day, Boston being more of a scrappy town, but it was the complete opposite back then as far as road running was concerned.
Yeah, and so like this race sort of tracks like the growth of the sport in the 70s and 80s, right? It goes from like, barely anybody finishing the first race to like when it took the 76 version, they had 2,090 people run it, and then the 1,549 finishers, right? So you're starting to see people, average recreational runners starting to figure out the marathon through this phase, and the marathon growing in popularity. And so now today, I mean, like, it's landed on, like, we're looking at, I think they're going to maybe break the record this year, but they hold the record for the most number of finishers at 53,627 from 2019. And it's always right around 50,000 finishers in the last few years. So it's like, it's
the
just
biggest one.
deal.
The biggest one. What I really liked watching and learning about the whole history of the New York Marathon was also like the women revolution about getting into running. That was very cool to kind of watch that happen and watch that develop, and how Fred Lebo was trying to get women involved. And so he would do, he did like this big women's only race at first just to get women involved in like a shorter road race, because at the time, in the 70s, they were like, no, a woman run a whole 42K, that's impossible. So it was just crazy, the different mindset, and how he really kind of led that movement to get women into running and to get women really into the marathon. And I just really liked reading about all of that, because I think like that's where it started. That's where we finally like were getting all involved and the whole movement began.
Yeah, and a part of it is him being avant-garde probably, but another part I sensed was just like Lebo trying to see what stuck. Just throwing a mini marathon for women,
Right.
trying to get a sponsorship from these like uh leg shaving products. There was almost a
Right.
partnership with Playboy. It's just like anything, right? Anything to try to fund and grow this event. In a way, I really admire his scrappiness.
Yeah, and I think that it's also just like really good business acumen, where you're just like, wait a minute, you look at the Boston Marathon as your I think that's the starting off point, right? You're like, New York is this big but kind of troubled grand city, and it looks over to the smaller, more sparkly, more kind of like white bread Boston. Sorry, Katelyn. And although that's not an insult, I guess, but our resident Bostonian Katelyn here, and Boston's this well-established marathon, but it's like kind of hoity-toity, right? It's like it's only for the elites and the sub-elites. It's an in club of runners. It's well established. It's been going on at that point for 70-ish years or whatever, and it's like, why can't New York have a marathon? But it's going to do it in the kind of the New York City mentality, which is like, we're going to go to the grimy parts of town. We're going to see the whole, we're going to see the whole damn city in 1976. And then also like, why wouldn't women run in this race?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Boston was very resistant to that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And very conservative, too conservative. Right. So yeah, I mean, New York's sort of always been right at the center of like the growth and the evolution of the sport in all the right ways. And, so now we are facing a scenario where like over 100,000 people apply to be in the race every year, and only 50,000 people get to run it. So, I mean, that's wild. So, and it used to be in October. Now it's in November. Probably a good thing from a climate change perspective, because usually the weather's pretty good, although there's been some hot days. I think the hottest it's ever been was around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's in the high 20s Celsius, which is brutal for running a marathon.
Right.
But it's typically more kind of closer to like high 40s, so like 6 to 10 degrees
I've
Celsius
got the weather forecast so far for this Sunday. It's looking, here we go.
Okay.
You guys ready for this?
If you're running New York, you're going to suddenly you've become very nervous.
It may change, we're still a few days out, but I was reading that at 8 a.m., they're looking at 38 degrees Fahrenheit, which 7 to 16 mile per hour winds throughout the morning, and 49 degrees Fahrenheit by 11. If you guys want to do that quick Celsius switch for me. But it's
Likely
chilly.
starting at like what are you saying?
4 or no?
4 degrees,
Yeah.
and then going up to like
7 or 8.
8. I mean, for me,
is that perfect?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's good.
Give me that.
Yeah.
As long as it's not too humid, we're good.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to pretty good conditions. We'll get to the elite race in a bit, and we'll go over the elite preview in a bit. But that might be cold for those traveling from the Rift Valley in Kenya and Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. They like to run in slightly warmer conditions than that. But for bodily performance, physical, athletic performance, those are good numbers.
Yep.
So we'll get into the course we'll get into the course records and whatnot as well, and whether or not they'll go down. I think maybe one of them will go down on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk about the course. New York is not fast. And it's not fast for a few reasons. The main one being that because Fred Lebo and company wanted to design a 5-borough course, that meant that they had to go over some bridges. And bridges have to go up and over water and then down. So they've got like little mini mountains that you've got to climb in New York, and there's also a lot of turns as well. So let's take our friends through a tour of the New York City Marathon course here. First, you start. So if you're running this race, which I've done in the past, they bring you out to Staten Island, and you're plunked down at Fort Wadsworth on Staten Island, an old retired military establishment, military base. And you're encamped there waiting for the race to start. Similar to Boston, you're kind of in the middle of nowhere waiting for a race to start. Got to stay warm. And then they bring you out in waves onto the Verrazano, I can always screw this word up, Verrazano Narrows Bridge.
The tongue twister. No thanks.
Yeah. You actually start the race on the bridge. So you don't technically start Staten Island, but they count the borough Staten Island. Okay. And you start on the bridge, and it is the coolest start in running. They walk you out onto the bridge, and you're on this gigantic bridge in the middle of the city. And then there's helicopters over top, and there's thousands of people, and you start at the foot of a bridge. It's like absolutely spectacular. And it's also the biggest hill in the race. So
you get it out of the way though.
Yeah, which I actually really like.
Me too.
I'm realizing an early uphill, because you have so much adrenaline going, you just make some of that incline, and then you get to enjoy the downhill later on. It's like, again, opposite of Boston, where I think a slight downhill at the start makes you maybe feel like you're having a special day, and you give up your whole pacing goal until you make it to that second half in Heartbreak Hill. Whereas New York humbles you from the start, so it can only get better from there.
Yeah. That's at least what you tell yourself as you're going into mile 2 in Brooklyn. So pop quiz for you guys. Can you name and order the 5 boroughs you run through?
Yes.
Without cheating.
Oh. Okay, I'm going to start.
Caitlin's like, oh, I'm cheating.
I'm cheating. No. I can go Staten Island, Brooklyn, Long Island? No, wait.
Long Island is not the technical term for the borough.
Oh, Queens. No. Yes? Okay,
Yes.
I got 3. Go, Alex. Queens.
Oh, and then it ends in the Queens.
Jesus,
Bronx,
guys, come on.
Queens, Bronx, Manhattan.
Harlem.
That is
Harlem. No.
Well, Harlem is not a borough. God. No.
Was that right? Queens, Bronx, Manhattan?
Yes.
Queens, Bronx. Okay.
So it goes. So you start, technically you're on the bridge, but you're in Staten Island. Sure, whatever. We'll give them that.
Okay.
Points for creativity at the New York City Marathon. Then you go to Brooklyn. You run quite a bit of the race in Brooklyn, like basically the first half in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Then you cross over into Queens. You run in Queens for a bit. Then you cross over into Manhattan briefly.
Okay.
Then you go up north into the Bronx for like a mile. They just basically it used to be with this course, you'd run around a telephone pole in the Bronx, and it was like you're in the Bronx for like 5 steps, and then you came out, and they were just like, well, we did the Bronx. There you go. And then you run back south down through Manhattan and finish in Central Park.
Okay. You can tell Alex and I
twice.
are not from New York. However,
my next guesses were Tribeca, Radio City Music Hall, and Jay-Z's house.
I don't know where Jay-Z lives, but maybe. Yeah, you definitely don't pass through any of those areas. So
is there a Strava segment at Jay-Z's house, Alex?
I don't know. Not yet.
He's going to have to Google it.
We could do it. We could look that up.
Strava search it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you cross a slew of bridges. You do the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. Yes, nailed it. You do the Pulaski Bridge. You do the Queensboro Bridge, the Willis Avenue Bridge, and then the Madison Avenue Bridge as your last bridge. There's some nice, nifty, clean spots that like identifiers in this course. If you're running it, it's like first 2 miles is the hardest part of the race, as we said. Then you got 13 miles right dead on 13 miles. You cross the Pulaski Bridge into Queens. So you finish Brooklyn, like the first half of the race is in Brooklyn, basically.
Okay.
And then 25K, you cross over to Manhattan and the Queensboro Bridge. And 25K, Queensboro Bridge is like kind of a notorious part of the course because it's when a lot of people feel like the race is starting to kind of wear them down a little bit. The Willis Avenue Bridge is right around like a little over 20 miles, right around 33K before you go into the Bronx. So there's another kind of like nice marker. That's like a spot marathoners think about a lot, is right around that 20 miles, 21 miles. And then you run a chunk through Harlem. So technically you were correct when you said Harlem, but it's not.
It's not a borough. Sorry.
Yeah. And that's a really big chunk of the race at the end part of the race. That's really grindy because there's like this slight uphill as you're running back towards Central Park, which is tough. And then you pass through Columbus Circle in the final mile, and then you're back into the park again, and you finish right in front of Tavern on the Green area, a great spot of the lower part of the park. And it's a great finishing shoot. It's a special spot. So that's the course. And guys, it ain't easy. But it's runnable. I'll say that.
From a marketing perspective, it's 14 feet net downhill.
Look at this guy.
Wow.
He's selling the race.
I'm selling the race. But it's the hardest way that you can get a net downhill course. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of twists and turns. So, although it kind of has, I think because people tend to compare it to Boston, it does have some weird little reputation as a fast major. Though I would say that people who've done Chicago and also New York, if you're looking to stay in North America, would contest that. But it's common for people to go to New York hoping for a fast time.
Yeah, I think that the average person, like a recreational runner, like ourselves, except for Alex, because you're sub elite, but
sub elite, baby,
sub elite. And Katelyn and I are sub elite. God, or is that like obsessive recreational? Spend too much time running.
That sounds about right.
For all of us, I think that you can run this course. You can run a good time in New York if you're really well prepared for it. And if you're willing to really relax in the first half, because it is hilly and it is twisty and turny. I was really surprised by how many turns there are, but when you think about it, it's like you're running through New York City. So of course there's going to be a lot of turns, right? To make the course make sense. But the elites, perfect segue. Let's pivot into the elite race.
Speaking of elites.
Exactly. The elites have historically put up slower times than obviously your wicked fast Berlin or Chicago performances. Do you guys have the course records off the top of your head? I'm trying to find it here in our show notes.
The men's course record. Yeah, I'm going to like completely undercut myself by calling New York City fast. Call it fast for maybe the average person. When it comes to the elites, the records are, I would argue in this day and age, pretty slow, kind of soft. Start on the men's side. Tamirat Tola has the course record at a pedestrian 204.58, which could pretty easily go down. And then on the women's side, we're looking at a 221. Is that right?
Yep.
221. Think about that. We've just had an athlete go 209. And 221 is the course record. Whatever you think of the 209, that's an incredible disparity.
This record has to go down. And also it's a very old record, right? If it's from 2003, I mean, if there's a record that has to go down, it's this one. I agree with Alex.
So interestingly, the men's course records seem to get broken only every about 10 years since 1980. Like if you look at the list of winners and course records, it's like kind of like clockwork. Every 10 years, 10 to 11 years, the course record gets broken. And it was just broken last year by our boy Tamirat Tola, the reigning Olympic marathon champion as well, who's going to be in the house in New York running the race, which is cool. So let's talk about the men's race first, just because set up that perfect segue there. So let's roll into the men's race. We have 4 guys who've run under 204. We've got 3 returning champions. So we've got champions from 2017, 19, 21, 22, and 23. No, yeah. And 23. So we've got 5 returning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 returning champions. So, it's a pretty stacked field, as they like to say. But it's legitimately like guys who are good at running this event, guys who have had success at this event, because there have been many top flight runners who have come to New York City, just like Boston, and they have struggled because the course is sort of like a paved cross-country course for 42.2 kilometers. So I would say your favorites going in are the 2022 New York City Marathon champion and a guy who's run 203 flat, and he's won Boston a couple of times, Evans Chibet, who ran Boston earlier this year and did pretty well, but has won in New York before. He's coming in as one of the top contenders, I would say. Who else we got? Alex, who do you like? We've got Gabriel Guillet of Tanzania. He's another guy who's run 203. I believe he ran the Paris Marathon as well, the Paris Olympic Marathon. So be curious to see how he does.
Gabriel Guillet, yes, I think what's missing with him is, yeah, he's thrown down a few good times, but he's yet to really emerge as a consistent performer. He's been on a lot of big start lists, including in Paris this last summer, and then dropped out of the race. He's like, I, I don't want to say a flash in the pan, but he's someone who's able to put down a lot, but we just haven't seen it on a consistent basis. I think if you're betting on this race, you're probably more likely to be more lucky to go with Tamarat Tola, who's had a heck of a year. So not only winning New York, setting a record, but being pinged at the last minute by the Ethiopian Olympic Committee saying, hey, remember this guy, Kenenisa Bekele? Yeah, he can't make the Olympics. You want to join the team and maybe come in as an alternate. Joins as an alternate, wins the Olympics. And what I like about New York too is that this is kind of an Olympic rematch. Evans Chibet, sure, might end up stirring the pot, but also between Tola and the Olympic silver medalist, we might have a good rematch of the summer. So that's Bashir Abdi, so Belgian national who was a silver medalist at the Olympics, and he's a consistent performer. He's taken bronze at the Tokyo Olympics and also at the 2022 World Champs. So he'll be someone else to look forward to. And I mean, this is like a lot of guys under that
It's a lot of
205,
guys.
204. It's a lot of guys.
A lot of
It's a lot
fast
of
guys.
guys.
A lot of fast runners. Yep.
And you like go down the list. Jeffrey Kamworor won in 2017, 2019, very legit. We have a few Americans who did well in Paris. Connor Mance, Clayton Young, CJ Albertson, also an American who's just fresh off a PV in Chicago, right? So this is just a few weeks ago. Albertson is known to be kind of a running daredevil or stunt man. He set this like crazy treadmill world record. Was it 50K on a treadmill or something like that?
Yep.
He goes on these like 5 minute per mile random long runs and posts them on Strava. He's kind of an animal, and so that's not really out of character. And if there's anyone who can double back from running a personal best of 208.17 is what he threw down in Chicago and go even faster, it's probably him. There's a big American contingent. There's Noah Droddy, if like that's your thing, the long-haired hippie runner. There's Jared Ward, who's like been around forever, Mormon athlete. We have, and then the American Canadians. Now, is it Canadian? Rory Linkletter, who, as Canadians, we followed his career quite a bit. He's a 208 marathoner now, just now training with a new coach. This is I mean, I can't stop talking. This is a very deep men's field.
There are 6 runners, 6 men, and 10 overall athletes in the elite field that I'm counting here that ran in the Paris Olympics, which is cool. I mean, I like the idea that we get to see these people again in short succession. I think it's good for the sport. I'm always like cheering on, trying to like promote the sport as sports entertainment. I think that's a good thing. And I think it's absolutely incredible that Tamarat Tola and Bashir Abdi, the 2 guys who went 1-2 in the Olympics, are showing up here and they're running it back and they're going head to head again. I think that that's going to be fantastic. I totally expect both of them to be in that lead group for the first half of the race. So keep an eye out on those two guys. And I think it's going to probably be a big field in the first half. I think I wouldn't even be surprised if we see CJ Albertson
Yeah.
out in the front, giving it a shot. And he ran Chicago a month ago, which is less than a month ago, which is crazy. So let's get into prediction time here. Katelyn, who you got for the men's race? Who's winning the New York City Marathon?
I usually don't like to go with what everyone would think is an obvious choice, but I'm taking a page out of Alex's book, and I do want to go with Tamara Tola, just because I know that there's a lot of guys in this lineup who are really fast. I know there are a lot of guys in this lineup who are experienced, but just his kick in the hills, I feel like maybe others share that strength as he does, but I'm just betting on him. I'm counting on him. I feel like he's going in there super motivated. As Alex said, going into the Olympics at the last minute as an alternate for your country and winning gold, how can you get more excited than that? I mean, what more motivation do you need? So I think he's just going in there guns blazing, and I think he's going to run an amazing race and take it. And I feel, maybe he's just going to keep his reigning kingdom of being the champ, and whether he breaks his own record or keeps his record, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm going with Tola.
That's a good one. Tola made me rich. If only I had actually bet money on him over the Olympics.
That's
He
right.
he made
You picked him. That's right.
Yep.
he and Cole Hawker, the 1500-meter champion, made me sound super smart for a minute there, and I'd love to go with Tola again, and maybe I
But,
would, but
but
I I also just want to oppose Caitlin and see what happens, and I have a lot of faith in another runner in the field because I think this guy is just too good to pass up. And this is not the past champion Tola, but the 2022 champion Evans Chibet. He's twice won the Boston Marathon, meaning that he's cool with these American races that are a little bit hilly, a little bit not just a time trial, inclement weather. But here's the stat that gets me to go with Chibet. He's finished first or second in 13 big marathons.
Yeah,
wow.
that's pretty good.
Yeah, amazing. Yep.
And I'm going to bet that this 14th marathon is a first place finish for him. So
Okay.
my money's on Chibet this time.
Michael?
Michael, what about you?
I like how the New York Roadrunners bring back past champions. Obviously the other races try to do this as well, but this is a great year because you're kind of folding in these, like, you're creating these dynasties, right? You're creating this legacy. And Alex, I agree with you.
Hmm.
I think Evans Chibet, he's got a bone to pick. He did not win the Boston Marathon this spring. He did not get picked for the Olympic squad for Kenya, and someone else, Mr. Elliot Kipchoge, did and dropped out of the race. So I imagine Evans Chibet is like, this is my race to win. I got all this time. I got this big on ramp after an April marathon, all kinds of time to rest, recover, and then a November marathon. Perfect bookend for the season. Knows the course, has won here before. As you've said, he's a incredible competitor who knows how to finish. I think he's going to beat Tamara Tola. I think Tamara Tola is going to come in second. He's going to fade a little bit, which saddens me because I love Tamara Tola. I loved watching the way he ran in Paris. And I think Bashir Abdi is going to get third. I think he's on a good run right now. He looked so good in Paris, and that was such a tough course. So there's my picks. I'm going Evans Chibet. Are we going to see a course record? Are we going to see a sub
Yes.
204.58? You think?
Yes. Yep. Yep. I think Chibet's become so comfortable in the 203 range. And I also think there's enough firepower to have at least one. Actually, this is what's going to happen. CJ Albertson takes the crew out in a super fast half marathon,
Okay.
sets it up for them. He's just fresh off his new PB or PR. He's got big balls. That's how he races. He's telling himself, I'm going for a 206. And so he drops a 62
Whoa.
first half.
Poor
And
CJ.
I
That's a lot of
don't know.
pressure.
I don't know what happens to him after that, but that totally helps everybody else. And Evans Chibet sails to a negative split, runs 204 low.
Okay.
If CJ Albertson runs 102 in the first half, he's gonna have to find like a nice diner to get breakfast in the Bronx when he pulls out, because that's intense. How do you guys think? On that note, how do you think the Americans, the two guys, Connor Mance, Clayton Young, who ran Paris, how will they do? Because this is interesting that they're both showing up, because they both ran pretty well in Paris, and it's not a great turnaround for a marathon. That this would be their third marathon of the year, because they also had to run the Olympic trials in March, right? Do you think they will both do well? Do you think they will both finish? Do you think either of them will place well? Katelyn?
I hope that they're going to be able to make the big turnaround. It is only 11 weeks. And I always go back to saying as a coach, I worry about that quick turnaround, but these guys could also be super pumped. And I know I watched an interview with these two guys, and I laughed a little bit because I think Clayton Young made a comment, and he said, like, no, I've just got to beat Connor at least one time. So I wonder if, because I think the last few races, it's so great that they run neck and neck, but at the end, I think Connor always seems to pull ahead, right? If I'm not mistaken. So maybe just between them as well, they're going to have that little bit of a fun rivalry, and maybe that will just push them along a little bit more. I don't know. That could also be kind of a motivation for them too. Of course, the marathon in general, but they've got kind of that little comment was kind of funny and cheeky. And I was like, oh, maybe that's going to push them to try to give it, to go a little harder during this marathon as well. But I bet Alex has better insight. What do you think, Alex?
No, what I mean, I think I agree with you. It's just there's so much value in having a training partner who's virtually your carbon copy.
Yep.
And so they're not entering this race alone or any race alone. They seem to always race together. So say their plan is, and I mean, at this point, they've run, they're probably set for a 206. They're probably going to try to bring their time down and run a 206. And when you have someone to chase, whoever feels better on the day might end up taking it in the last couple kilometers, but you know for a fact you'll have someone in the first 30, maybe even 35K to key off of. So
That's
it's
helpful.
going to be, it is helpful, right? And
Yeah.
it's going to be who has it. And they've had a heck of a year. They've raced very intelligently, a good trials race, super controlled back in late January, early February, solid Olympic finishes. They've had 11 weeks is a long time, but I was talking to my coach about this to really reduce it to the sub elite level. He said, when you're fit, you don't need 16 weeks. You need to take a little bit of off time, and you
Okay.
come back. You don't lose that much fitness. To me, for my half marathon coming up, he said you need, a few weeks and you're there. And
Right.
so if he thinks I can pull it off, I'm sure they can pull it off.
And on that note, let us pivot to the women's
All right.
field, which is very similarly deep and exciting as the men's field. It's got 6 women that have run under 220.
Yep.
Along the top 2 athletes in terms of time are Sheila Chepkirui, who is Kenyan athlete who's run 217 and a half, and then one of the all-time great distance runners, Teranish Tababa, is in New York City as well, and she's run 217.56. However, I would put a little asterisk by that because she has not competed much since that run, which was in 2017, which feels like a million years ago. She's 39 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel like if she had been kind of consistently competing through this phase of the super shoes and these like aggressive jumps and time, she'd be like right there with some crazy fast personal best. I mean, as it stands, her 217 high, I remember when that happened. I remember watching that race, and she did that race the hard way. She like suffered quite badly in the last 10 kilometers, but went out so hard in the first half. So she's a baller. She's able to run very, very hard. I mean, if you don't know who Teranish Tababa is, do yourself a favor and watch some YouTube clips of her on the track in past Olympic Games. She's got a whole bunch of medals, and she is an all-time great and a very great tactical runner as well. So Vivian Chariot is also running. She's a 2:18 runner. Teferi from Ethiopia, 2:19. Diradida from Ethiopia as well, 2019, 2:19 runner as well. And the Masters GOAT, Edna Kiplagat. Katelyn, our girl, our 40-plus queen.
Awesome. And she's got a third place in Boston this year. So she's up there. She's running hard.
I'd forgotten that she came third in Boston. That was a spirited performance if there ever was one. And she just shows that she knows what she's doing in these races. Again, another one of the all-time great runners. So, and then we got a spate of American runners as well. And we've also got a bunch of athletes that ran the Olympics, including returning champ Helen Obiri, Sharon Lokedi, who's also won the New York City Marathon as well. And I think that there's going to be a lot of attention on Helen Obiri. She did quite well in the Olympics, but she did not win. And she knows how to run these hilly, tough courses, as evidenced by the Boston Marathon and the New York City Marathon last year, and the Boston Marathon last year as well. So, guys, who do we have? Who's winning this race? Katelyn, who you got?
I'm going with Obiri. I feel like she has, something to prove. I feel like she wants to go out there and win it all. And she wants to, she's the reigning champion. I feel like she's going to want more. Like you said, she didn't win the Olympics. And I feel like there's something there that's going to push her to really want that gold at the New York Marathon. So I'm going with her. Before we continue that, Michael, I have a question for you, because you remember last week or last podcast, we were talking about those famous nicknames that all of these elite women runners have. Do you know? Are you
gonna tell me Turnish Dababa's nickname?
I was gonna ask you if you knew it, but it doesn't have anything to do with smiling.
The babyface killer.
Oh, I had the babyface destroyer. Is it killer?
Babyface destroyer? That's what it is. She's the babyface destroyer.
I knew you would know, though, and before I forgot, I wanted to make sure I got that in there. But I'm going with Obiri, guys, for first place all the way.
That's a great pick. It's so funny because you picking Obiri, if you're looking at the start list, and that's what we're doing here. We have like the official start list in front of us, so we're going down in names. If you look at the start list, it looks like you're going totally off the map, because time-wise, Obiri's ranked like 9th with the 2:23, which is wild that that's her greatest time achieved so far. I would call this start list weird, because I actually think that the top contenders are nowhere in the top 5 or even 7. My pick, Katelyn, is similar to yours. I'm picking Sharon Lokedi. And Sharon Lokedi is somewhat the bridesmaid of Obiri until until this weekend, I think. Lokedi was second to Obiri's first in Boston earlier this year. She's had her moment of glory. She won New York in 2022, Lokedi. But in the last year and a bit, it's been all Obiri. Like, Obiri's going to try to complete something incredible, winning her second consecutive New York City Marathon on the back of 2 Boston Marathon victories as well. I'd love to see her win, because I think that's incredible. But I think if someone is about to take her down, it's not Chepkarui, it's not Dababa, maybe not even Chariot, not these 2:17, 2:18 women, but it's Lokedi. And in doing so, I think that either Obiri, Lokedi, and maybe even other athletes in the field will go under that 2:21 mark, because as we said, I do think it's a little bit soft. They need good weather for it, but I really don't think the podium's going to look anything like the start list.
I think we're going to get a repeat from Boston this year. And I think that I agree with you, Alex. Again, I'm going with the Alex pick here. I think that Lokedi is going to outpace Helen Obiri in the closing. And I think we're going to get a 2:20 just on the north side of 2:20. And we're going to get a course record. So it's going to be a minute and change faster than that super dusty 2003 course record of 2:21:31. And Lokedi, she came just off the podium in the Olympics, right? She was right in there with that lead group in the end stages of the Olympic
Yeah,
marathon.
she was fourth.
Yeah. And so this is this like neat little battle that's going on, and both Lokedi and Obiri are kind of effectively American citizens. They both live in the United States and have for a really long time. Like, and particularly in Lokedi's situation, she went to college in the U.S., I think at Kansas or Kansas State, and Obiri's living in Colorado and has been training there for years. So, and interesting brand thing going on here too. Obiri's going to have the super neat On Running, the Swiss brand shoes, the like shoes that are made by robots on her feet. It's going to be the second or third time she's wearing those shoes. And we're going to get a real good look at them now that we know that they exist and that she's wearing them. They seem to perform pretty well for her. And the Lokedi is like Under Armour athlete, which you don't see a lot of W's from the Under Armour crew at World Marathon Majors. So really, really interesting battle between them. And I think it's going to come down to them. And unfortunately, I don't think Turnish Tabab is going to be a factor in the second half of this race. Americans. Let's talk Americans.
Des Linden will be there.
Yep.
Right.
Dakota Lindworm. Mm-hmm. Alfine Tuliamak, who was represented the U.S. in the Olympics in Tokyo, and she won the U.S. Olympic trials in 2020. She's going to be in the house. Kellen Taylor, who's kind of one of these athletes who's always performed pretty well, but it just never seems to line up in the big moment for her. But she's got a 224 under her belt as well. So, and Jess McLean. So we've got a feature. It should be up by the time you're listening to this podcast. We've got a feature. Amby Burfoot interviewed Jess McLean and did a feature on her, kind of went through her history as a runner. Really interesting athlete who emerged seemingly kind of out of nowhere if you're not following the American distance running on a close level over the course of a long period of time. But she finished fourth in the U.S. Olympic trials, just missed that top three, just got beat by Lindworm for that last Olympic spot. And then, if you remember the drama from the summertime, she was called into Paris at the last second. She flew to Paris like in the days before the Olympic marathon and was brought in and was not really told why, but it was basically like, an athlete's having an issue, we might need a backup. She was in Paris, and then when she showed up in Paris, they were like, we're good, actually. The athletes decided to run. And then she got to hang out. She said she'd drink a beer, watch the race. And she watched as
Fiona O'Keefe, right?
Fiona O'Keefe dropped out like in the first couple of kilometers and clearly was massively injured and could not run. So pretty heartbreaking experience for her. But and as someone who's sort of come out of nowhere as a 30-year-old, although she has a pretty good pedigree as a high school and college runner back in the day. So, but pretty good at the marathon. She's running. She had a big PR when she ran the U.S. Olympic trials. She's got a 2:25:46 from a very tough day in Orlando. It was not ideal running weather. And she's running New York. She could do something. She could be interesting. She could be somebody to watch. So Jess McLean, keep that name there. How do you guys think Dakota Lindworm is going to do?
I think she's kind of like the women's mirror image of Clayton Young and Connor Mance in the sense of how these athletes have done this year. You know, good showing at the marathon trials, solid showing at the Olympics. Also, just kind of feels like she's due to complete a good trifecta for 2024. If I have a good feeling about Young and Mance, well, it just extends that I have a good feeling about Lindworm too. I think she's gonna have a good day.
Cool. All right, let's wrap up that the elite portion of the competition with this thought. You guys thought I was going to get through a podcast talking about World Marathon Majors without mentioning Eliud Kipchoge. And next week, teaser. If you like Eliud Kipchoge, we've got the Kipper content for you. Next week, we're doing an entire pod dedicated to the warrior god of marathon running, Kipchoge. we're going to talk about, he's turning 40 next week. We're going to
For
talk
the
all
seventh time.
yes, he's turning 40/50/ I don't know how old he is. So we're going to talk all about what we've learned from Kipchoge as a marathon runner that can apply to all of us, recreational runners, everybody. What we've gleaned from the master of the art form in the last 10 years in particular. So that's next week's pod. But I got to say, the New York, he's never run New York. At one point, he's sponsored by Abbott. I mean, like, he is incentivized to run the majors. At one point, he said he wanted to run. I think at one point his project was to run and win all of the majors. Didn't go well for him in Boston. I don't know if they're ever going to see him back on Boylston again. I don't think he wants to go back and run that race, although I think he should. New York's just sitting there for him. Pulled out of the Olympics. It's there. He could have trained back up again, although he had an injury, I know. But yeah, he's got to do New York. He's got to run New York.
He will run New York. He needs to complete all 6. I mean, that's just the way it is. He's going to do it at some point. I just don't know if he's going to do it this year.
He won't get his 6-star medal if he doesn't run. If he doesn't run New York. Can
you imagine the GOAT, the best, most famous, legendary marathon runner of all time, not have the 6-star medal? He's going to get it. He needs it.
Come on, he needs to complete the trophy case. It's
of course.
I've won London a bunch of times. I've won Tokyo. I've won Berlin a bunch of times. World records, 6-star medal.
Yeah, maybe in 2025 when he turns 40
again. Mm-hmm. Yes, or 50 or 60 or however old he is. Okay, yes. So cool stuff in New York, especially if you're going to New York. A couple of things. I'm going to New York. I'm going to cover it. And I am going to check out the Swiss brand On, the aforementioned shoes that Helen O'Beary is wearing. They're crazy. Alex, we've looked at them. We've done a story on them. We're hopefully going to get a pair to test, perhaps out of New York City.
Cool.
Hey, get them in size 11 if you don't mind.
I'll ask the robot to do. Can you do a mold of your feet for me, and I'll just bring 2 feet? And
I would love that.
I'm an 8.5, by the way. Don't forget about me, guys.
The robot's going to be doing overtime for Marathon Handbook. So I'll be going and checking out the lab that they've got set up there. I'm not sure whether or not it's open to the public, but they've got this running lab set up in Soho, I believe, which you should check out if it is open to the public, because they brought one of the robots from Switzerland.
Cool.
So one of the robots is going to be spinning shoes. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll put a link in the show notes. It's crazy. The video is wild. Basically, a robot does a Spider-Man imitation and spins a pair of shoes out of nothing in 8 minutes. And apparently they're pretty phenomenal. And Helen O'Beary has totally kicked ass in them. So we're excited to get them. And I'm excited to see the robot go to work. I want to know what the robot's name is. I'm definitely going to get a picture with the robot. And we'll do some content about the robot as well. And then other things of note. New Balance, who are the major sponsor of the New York City Marathon. They're doing a bunch of cool stuff. They got a pop-up with this group called Endorphins that is at the Shopify building in Manhattan. I think it's in and around Soho somewhere. So there'll be some neat New York City specific stuff there. Of course, at the expo, you want to check out what New Balance has got going on there. Shout out to our friends and sponsor of this podcast, Wahoo Kicker Run. They have got a booth. They've got something set up. I believe it's with Hoka. They've been doing a partnership with Hoka throughout these majors. I saw them in Chicago. We saw them in Boston. The most spectacular treadmill ever created, the super shoe of treadmills. If you're in New York and you've not seen this thing in person, go check it out. It's a treadmill that you can actually run on that feels like running on the ground, because you can come to a complete stop on your own. No spinning treadmill of death any longer. You control the treadmill. The treadmill does not control you. It's crazy.
And you can fly. You can run pretty much as fast as you want. 4-minute mile is the max. So yeah,
cool. Yeah, it's extraordinary. So check that out. And there's all kinds of group runs. Meb's New Balance sponsors Meb now. Meb, who won the New York Marathon in 2009, is a legend of the sport and a super nice guy. He's doing a group run, a shakeout run on the Saturday, I believe, in Central Park. Bunch of other brands are going to be there doing their shakeout runs as well. There's usually an international run where it's like all the international runners get together and do a run together, which is kind of cool. So all kinds of fun stuff going on in New York City. And it's a great place to be on marathon weekend. I would recommend, if you're a running nerd and you maybe can't get into New York because the lottery is impossible, book a weekend in New York during the marathon, even if you're not running. It's a really cool weekend.
Sounds like Kinda a lot of fun. Yeah, sounds like a ton of fun.
Yeah. So guys, last thing we'll do before we get out of here. What's your must-do tourist spots for New York City? Where are you going? Katelyn, where are you going when you're going to New York?
Okay. I've only been to New York a couple of times, and for the same reason. And maybe I'm going to shock you guys with my one must-do activity in New York, but it would be to go to a musical or two. I am.
Oh, boy.
I mean, oh, yeah, Michael.
Oh, boy.
Okay. I was a music major in college. I went to
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, there we go. There was my little surprise of why I would want to see musicals. So I was a music major. I went to Berklee College of Music, and
holy shit! So you're like a real guy. I swear.
Why are you guys making me sing on this podcast? Like, you're just watching me like laugh. Katelyn, what the heck? You sing?
Used to. No, I played the upright bass in college, and so I was in a ton of pit orchestras, like my whole high school, college, after college, for musicals, and I absolutely loved it. And so I know a ton of musicals, like every word to every song, and I'm a super music nerd. And then I realized I was a morning person. So this was not sustainable work for me.
Right.
But I still absolutely love all musicals. And so here in Costa Rica, I don't really get to see any. And so it's kind of not a big part of my life now. So when I do go up to Boston, or of course to New York, like Broadway, I would love to choose a musical to go see. So I would say, if you like musicals, I mean, there's no better place to see a musical than in New York City. There's just nothing better.
I have some insider knowledge also that Michael used to be in a band. So guys, we could like
very different level than Katelyn.
Oh.
Katelyn went to one of the most prestigious music schools in the world.
Wait a second,
I played in some
band?
punk band in 2003. Yeah.
Are there recordings?
There are, but they're not available to anybody. Oh man. Wow.
So
Katelyn.
Musicals, everyone.
Give me a musical. What's your dream musical? What's the greatest hit?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I love even like the real classics like Les Miserables. I mean, I love Les Miserables. That's what the music is just so moving, but I played in a ton. I can't even think of off the top of my head, like, Ragtime, Phantom of the newer ones. I don't know as much. Like I would like to see even Wicked. I haven't seen any of like the newer age musicals. I've seen a lot of, I've been part of a lot of older ones, but I mean, you've got like the classic, with the two gangs in New York. Oh my gosh. What is it?
West Side Story.
West Side Story. I mean, I love a lot of the classics, but I would go see, there are a lot of new ones out there that I haven't seen. So look into it, go see a musical, and just love every second of it, because you're not going to get better, I think, quality than you will on Broadway.
Wow. You learn something new every day. That's incredible. We need to do a music podcast now, because I didn't realize that we had like an expert in something else here. Alex, what's your like, if you're going to New York this weekend, it's like, I'm soliciting suggestions at this point. If you're going to New York this weekend, what are you doing?
Tough one to pull off if you're there for the marathon because of the quick turnaround. But one thing I want to do is to go to a live Saturday night live taping.
Oh,
A taping.
amazing.
Okay, yeah. Good call. how do you even do that? I guess you probably have to put your name in or get tickets or whatever way in advance, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do it. I was in New York a few weekends ago and it was just a bit too quick and I didn't look into it, but that's on the bucket list. I watch it, like I watch the YouTube clips and
So
would love to
funny.
see what it's like to be there in person.
Yeah.
Just because like
Uh,
it's not the same live, right? Like just the set changes and all this stuff. I'm just kind of fascinated with the behind the scenes part of it.
they've got there's a film of the making of the first episode of Saturday Night Live called It's Saturday Night, I think is what it's called.
Mm.
Which is I think just come out recently. But anyway, what's your dream pairing if you're watching a taping of Saturday
Oh,
Night
yeah.
Live? What is your what's your host musical guest musical act? What's your picks?
Oof. Okay. I've been really into Dave Chappelle comedy for the last couple years, just because I think he always finds an angle, and he's a bit of a
Gonna
genius in a sense.
gonna get us canceled here, Alex. Keep
He's
going. Why do you like Dave Chappelle so much? Tell us a couple Dave Chappelle jokes.
I like his sense of style. And I as for
Moving on.
music performer, oof, who would I like to see live? I would probably like to see. That's tough. You know who are really good live? The Lumineers.
Oh man,
Okay.
gee. What's wrong with kids these days, Caitlin?
Michael
Wait,
and
what?
I are
What
like
were?
in another, Michael, I saw an ad this today that the Smashing Pumpkins are coming to Costa Rica. And I was like, Michael will know who the Smashing Pumpkins are.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, Alex, you gotta know this. He knows this.
Yes,
It's like
yeah, but that's the past. That's the past. You see someone who's big live now.
yeah. Who would I want to see live on Saturday Night Live? That'd be tough. I don't know.
It's the thing is you need to think of who can reproduce their music live. That's
Yep.
why I went Lumineers. They're
Yep.
they're
Yeah,
they're
that'd be
very good
tough.
at reproducing their music live, and a lot of artists can't.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of it's quite produced, right? So, I mean, I'd go Radiohead, but like that's just I don't think Radiohead are doing Saturday Night Live anytime soon. That's not going to happen. Or The Smile, which is like Tom York's Radiohead adjacent band. They would maybe do Saturday Night Live, and they're current right now. They just released an album. So okay, my go tos are you got to do a nice restaurant, and you got to go to see some art. You got to go to MoMA. MoMA's packed though. It's packed because they actually, if you've got a finisher's medal, they let you in for free
Oh,
afterwards,
Cool,
yeah.
which is cool.
Okay, cool.
cool.
I'd go MoMA. I'd actually go the Whitney because the Whitney, the new, well, not new. It's like a 10-year-old building now. The Renzo Piano architect guy who designed the new Whitney. It looks like a big giant boat, a big ship.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, the Whitney's awesome. It's an American art museum. Lots of interesting stuff. The Biennale is amazing, but it's not going on right now. Gagosian Gallery. The cool thing about New York is you can go and walk into art galleries in New York, small private art galleries that are selling the art, that are representing artists. Go and check out the galleries. They're like little museums. Marion Goodman, I think, is a gallery that does photography. It's really good. The David Zwerner Gallery, Gagosian Gallery is killer. If you want to go down a weird rabbit hole about how weird the art world is, read the New Yorker feature on Larry Gagosian. It's totally freaking weird. He's a character. But you get to see all kinds of neat contemporary art if you crawl around the Lower West Side and Soho in New York. That's what I like to do. I would recommend an obvious pick in New York is you go to the Gramercy Tavern and you get the steak because the Gramercy Tavern is awesome. So that's going to be my go-tos. And that's one of the things I'm going to sneak away and do when I'm done all the coverage in New York City. All right. We did it, guys. We crossed the finish line. We made it back to Central Park alive. And we're all going to go to Tavern on the Green now and sip an ice cold beer because we have finished the New York City Marathon preview show. Anything to plug? Alex, what do you got? What's coming up? What's coming down the pike for the YouTube channel?
I have a dedicated review of 2024's most elusive running / racing shoe, the Adidas Adios Pro Evo 1, coming out next week.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. We're going to see a lot of that in New York, I think. I think our boy Tamara Tola is going to be wearing a comfortable pair of Pro Evos. Maybe even the Pro Evo 1.5 or whatever they call it. What's the second version 2 of the
Well, it might be the
version
version
1?
2. We haven't heard of what it's called, but rumors are that there's already a version 2 out there.
I'm psyched for that video because that's the most fascinating super shoe since I think the first 4% that came out.
Agreed.
Katelyn.
All right. Well, if you're listening to the podcast, make sure that you've checked your inbox, because today's newsletter, when this podcast will be coming out, is stock full of stuff about the New York Marathon. So any other information that you want, or if you want to make sure that everything that we've said you've got in writing somewhere, that's going to be in today's newsletter. So you can check that out for information about even how to get in next year or how to get in the year after. If we have convinced you to run the New York Marathon today, I give you all the ways that you can get in and at least get a good chance at getting into the New York Marathon.
I didn't even prep you guys for that, and you both nailed the sales pitch for each of your things. That's awesome. And of course, if you don't subscribe to the newsletter, by all means do so. It's great. It comes out 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. And the podcast, rate and review. It helps us out a lot. I think that we've grown this channel quite a bit over the last several months, and we want to continue to grow. And the way we continue to grow is by getting reviews and getting in front of people. So, all right, guys. So New York City, I'm going to be there covering it live, doing the Instant Reaction podcast. And then next week, talking all about how Eliud Kipchoge changed our running lives and what we can glean from it to become better runners ourselves. Until next week. Thanks.
Bye.